I'm Joe Scott, and this is 2020. Hello and welcome to the first video from the 2020s on the Answers with Joe channel. Thanks for joining me. Congratulations on surviving this long. A lot of people make predictions about the future. I do it a lot on this channel, and I'm always curious how well those predictions are going to hold up. Like, how crazy are they going to look someday? Because when you look back at predictions from the past, they're kind of crazy. Predictions from the past are fun because they really say a lot more about the time period in which they were made than about the future itself. All we can really do is look at what's going on around us right now, look at trends from the past, and make plans for, how that might continue. So it's really more of a reflection of the technologies that are prevalent at the day, the trends that are going on at the time, and just the general value system of the world when that prediction was made. So 2020 being a pretty big year, I thought it might be kind of fun to see what kind of predictions people made in the past about what the world would look like in the year 2020. And here are 5 doozies for you. Prediction number 1, everything will be made of steel. This prediction was actually made by Thomas Edison in 1911 in an interview that he did with the Miami Metropolis, in which he said this: "The house of the next century will be furnished from basement to attic with steel." That sounds comfortable. I can't imagine living in a house that's just like a steel house. But again, you gotta kind of have to look at what was going on in the world at the time. The Art Deco movement was big at the time, which involved a lot of steel structures. You can look at the Chrysler building that went up a little bit after this, but it was in the planning stages at that time. Plus, steel was actually pretty new as a building material at the time. The Bessemer process was created in the late 1800s, and that actually made steel something that could be produced in high volume for the first time. Before that, it was only used in smaller items like weaponry. So this set off a wave of construction using steel and bridges and buildings and skyscrapers and stuff like that. And this is what was going on in Edison's world as he, became an adult and started becoming an inventor and a businessman and made a name for himself in that world. This was what was going on around him. Steel was cheap, it was strong, and it was being used more and more all the time. So it's not illogical for him to think that it was going to continue into the future. Now, ironically, steel has been coming up a lot more in this channel specifically around things like the Cybertruck and around the Starship with SpaceX, this 301 stainless steel that apparently has a lot of properties that make it very valuable in those use cases. So it's kind of an interesting thought, maybe we're kind of rediscovering the greatness of steel in a way that Edison once did, 100 years ago. Prediction number 2, apes will work in factories and as chauffeurs. Okay, here's what blows my mind about this prediction. It was made in 1994. Seinfeld was on when this prediction was made. And it came from a pretty respected source, the Rand Corporation. So the Rand Corporation was set up after World War II. It was kind of this place where they were going to assemble some of the brightest minds and futurists in America to kind of help us get ahead on technologies to keep us ahead of the rest of the world. And they have a pretty great track record. The space station, global positioning satellites, the internet, modern computing as we know it. All of this stuff was thought up at the Rand Corporation years before it ever actually happened. But I guess when you're in the business of predicting the future, you're gonna come up with some stinkers. So yeah, somehow in 1994, in their yearly report that they put out, they predicted that by the year 2020, we would be breeding super intelligent animals that would be capable of working in our factories and driving us around. It actually suggested that well-trained apes driving cars would actually reduce the number of auto accidents. I don't know why apes would be better at driving than we are. And they even suggested that every household might have a live-in ape that's there to do the housework as a housekeeper. So, ape slavery, I guess. You want Planet of the Apes? Because that's how you get Planet of the Apes. This was in 1994. Like, how did they think this in 1994? So again, you got to look at what was one of the big things that was going on in 1994. The Human Genome Project was going on in 1994. We've gotten so used to having done this by now, we forget what a big deal the Human Genome Project was. It was started in 1990 and it was completed in 2003. It was the first time that we had ever mapped the entire human genome. This had never been done before, and a lot of people were predicting that we would have this immense power and capability to do all kinds of crazy things. Once we finally crack the human genome, we'd be able to edit it and do all kinds of stuff. The movie Gattaca is a great example of how people were thinking at the time about the human genome. The human genome and gene editing and what we can do with it. So they had a lot of crazy ideas, but I mean, let's be honest, there's some cool stuff that we can do. Anybody now, it's very commonplace. You can just spit in a cup and get all kinds of interesting DNA results to find out about your history, your ancestors, and also about your own personal health. Sometimes you get life-saving stuff out of that. Plus, genetic editing is improving with CRISPR-Cas9. Just in the last year, there were some breakthroughs in that makes it even more accurate and more powerful. So, you know, maybe no smart apes, but potential cures for cancer, I'll take it. Prediction number 3, nobody will drink tea or coffee. This one came from a person you've heard of many times before, Nikola Tesla. You know, Nikola Tesla, genius, electricity guy. So did Tesla know something about the tea and coffee industry that we just don't know about? Did he predict that there would be some kind of alternative that would take its place that we'd all be more interested in by this time? Actually, he just thought we'd be a lot healthier today. He said in an article that he wrote in 1937 that in 100 years or so, quote, coffee, tea, and tobacco will no longer be in vogue. He talked about how he personally eschews all stimulants and that he just believed that in the future people would be, it would simply no longer be fashionable to poison your system with harmful ingredients. I'm kind of reading what he said here. Now, it should also be noted that in the very next sentence, he praised alcohol, calling it, quote, the elixir of life. He also, in the same article, spoke really highly of eugenics, so we just call him eccentric. I mean, this is the same guy who once fell in love with a pigeon, so. But really the crux of his argument was that we would be consuming healthier food at this point, which, yeah, he was wrong about that. Not only are we making horrible food choices in what we eat in general, the number of diabetes cases are going up, obesity is going up. Yeah, he was wrong. Frankly, I think Wall-E was closer in their prediction of the future. But another thing that's a little bit concerning isn't just that we're making poor food choices, it's that the food itself, like natural raw food that's coming out of the ground, is less nutrient dense than it used to be because of soil erosion. And this is actually why a lot of dietitians recommend taking supplements now more than ever. It's not just a fad and it's not just a money thing, it's that the food that we are consuming has less nutrients in it than it used to. Prediction number 4, we'll have the power of telepathy. So yeah, a lot like the one about the apes earlier, this one also came from fairly recently. 6 years ago, actually. This was made by Michael J. O'Farrell, who heads up the Mobile Institute. He's kind of an expert in technology innovations and trends and stuff like that. And in 2014, he released a book called Shift 2020. And in that book, he talked about nanotechnology specifically as something that's going to change the way we are communicating with each other. He wrote, in the pending nanomobility era, I predict telepathy and teleportation will become possible by the year 2020, with both commonplace by 2040. Crazy, but depending on your definition of telepathy, maybe right. See, when I hear telepathy, I think the ability to communicate with somebody else using only your thoughts. And I think that's what he was talking about too. But if you consider telepathy to be just transmitting information, say, to a computer, we are kind of there. We have prosthetic limbs that can be fully controlled with just our thoughts, and now there's full body exoskeletons that give disabled people the ability to walk for the first time, and pretty soon those could be completely controlled by thoughts. Now again, these aren't really communicating thoughts so much as brain signals through the motor cortex and a brain implant, but still. And of course we can't leave out Neuralink, who just announced their project in the last year and how this is going to actually move brain implants forward. They actually want to make getting a brain implant as simple as getting a LASIK surgery. So not quite there yet, but the wheels are definitely in motion. Unlike some of the others on this list, I think this one is actually going to be less and less outrageous over time. And prediction number 5, everybody will be rich. Let's hope this one comes true as well. In 1966, Time magazine had an article called The Futurists, and in it they predicted this: that machines will be producing so much that everyone in the US will, in effect, be independently wealthy. They predicted that the average non-working family could make $30,000 to $40,000 a year just free. So if that's in 1966 dollars, adjusted for inflation, that would be closer to $300,000 a year. Yeah, that hasn't happened. But their central point that we would be getting paid because machines would be doing all the work, well, it's not too far off the mark. As I've talked about on this channel, robotics and automation have already started taking over jobs from people, and it's going to be even more accelerated into the future. The difference is no one's getting paid for it. I talked about this in previous episodes, that this is a problem that we're running into that's only going to be getting bigger over time, especially as autonomous cars get going. The entire transportation sector is going to change. You know, we are about to encounter a technological disruption that's going to affect the economy, and it's going to put a whole lot of people out of work. Now, this is why Andrew Yang and many others are starting to talk about a universal basic income, something else I've talked about previously on this channel. Now, UBI, of course, is not meant to make us all rich. It's meant to serve as sort of a safety net so that for those people who do kind of fall between the cracks in this economic disruption, they won't just completely be left out in the cold. There's a lot of details to hammer out, lots of opinions on the subject, but this basic problem that they illustrated in 1966 is starting to become a reality. Whether or not we'll come to the same solution that they came to, I guess we'll just have to see. So as I said before, predictions of the future are really more of a reflection of what's going on at the time that that prediction was made. You know, what trends are happening, what breakthroughs, what everybody's talking about. So why don't we play with this a little bit? And I'm going to throw it to you. You guys make a prediction to what you think the world's going to look like 100 years from now in 2120. And you know, in 100 years, maybe we can go take a look at it and have a good laugh from the vats that are keeping our brains alive. Assuming you can laugh as a brain in a vat. Maybe it's a glurg. We can glurg over it. And hey, before you go, I just want to let you guys know I'm going to be at Fully Charged Live in Austin on February 1st and 2nd. The whole Our Ludicrous Future crew is going to be there. Tim and Ben, many other great YouTubers that talk about electric cars and whatnot. It's going to be a great time. There's going to be some cars there that you're never going to get to see anywhere else. The Rivian truck's going to be there. All kinds of fun stuff. I'll be speaking. We'll be doing a live OLF podcast while we're there. So anyway, if you're remotely interested, check it out. I'll put a link down in the description below. Description. I can say the word description. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. And I wish you guys the best 2020 you could possibly have. There's a lot of stuff going on that's just really fun and exciting. I'm going to be covering it all here, and can't wait to see what the future holds. So good luck to all of us in 2020. See you next time.